Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Linton, one of the licensed lay ministers at St Peter's Church in Farnborough, and this is a short midweek meditation which I hope you might find helpful. I'm currently reading through the Old Testament book of Judges, and the commentary that I've been using suggested a way of looking at the book that struck me as helpful. There are 12 judges in the book, who in various ways helped to rescue the people of Israel from invasion and exploitation from surrounding nations, which we're told was a consequence of turning away from God, from Yahweh, the God of Abraham and their fathers, and instead worshipping local fertility gods. Many of those 12 judges are obscure. But others are no doubt familiar, people like Gideon and Samson. But one of the earliest was Ehud, notable for being left-handed, or maybe using his left hand because his right hand was withered. And because of that, the king of Moab, Israel's enemy, didn't regard him as a threat, and therefore he was able to draw his concealed sword with his left hand and kill the king, and then subsequently to overthrow their oppressors. But the point made by my commentary is that Ehud was an unexpected threat, maybe someone with a disability, and that subsequent judges were also unexpected people unlikely to become successful military leaders. Gideon was, we're told, the least of an obscure family. Samson was in many ways an unreliable thug. Jephthah was the son of a prostitute who became a bandit. Deborah was, and please don't misunderstand me, a woman, an unlikely military leader in those historical times. So none of them had a very promising background to be used by God to rescue the people of Israel. But nevertheless, God chose them and used them in unexpected ways too. Ehud with his left-handed sword skills. Gideon with his army reduced from 32,000 to just 300, and with nothing but jars, torches, and trumpets. Samson blinded and in chains, causing the building to collapse on the Philistine rulers. Deborah, with the help of Barak, defeating the enemy's army, but their commander being killed by another woman who should have been protecting him. All unexpected people used by God in unexpected ways. And it's a pattern we see throughout the Bible. Joseph emerging from prison to save the Egyptians from famine. David, that great king, was the youngest son of Jesse, initially ignored out keeping the sheep when the prophet Samuel called. Many of the prophets came from obscure backgrounds. And in the New Testament, when God chose to intervene, we find Jesus born not in a palace, but in a stable to working class parents, working for 30 years as a carpenter, and then rejected by the religious authorities. Peter, James, and John were humble fishermen. Matthew was a despised collaborator, and Paul was the feared persecutor of the church. In fact, it's hard to think of anybody in the Bible who was a powerful and natural leader when God chose to call them. Perhaps Moses, brought up as an Egyptian prince, but even he felt inadequate when God called him. So I think we can say that it wasn't the person who was called that mattered, but the God who called them and the God who used them. So what about us? The point of all this is that God calls and uses even people like us. Unexpected people, yes, but called by God, we can be used in unexpected ways. What mattered in all the cases that I've mentioned is that when God called them, they responded. Often hesitantly, sometimes reluctantly, but ultimately they obeyed. They heard God's call and followed him. What about us? How will God call us today? How will he want to use us? And how will we respond? Not, of course, in our strength, but in God's. As the hymn puts it, we go in faith, our own great weakness feeling, and needing more each day thy grace to know. We rest on thee, and in thy name we go. So let's not be surprised when that call comes. God can and will use us to serve him if we will allow him to do so. If we will say, here am I, send me. Let's spend a moment in quiet as we think about that, as we listen to what God is saying to us. Amen.